In the grand halls of Valdoria Castle, where whispered secrets could topple kingdoms and a single act of defiance could mean death, one man would discover that protecting innocence sometimes requires breaking every rule he swore to uphold. What began as an ordinary morning in the royal court would spiral into a dangerous game of loyalty, power, and moral courage that would forever change the fate of a young prince and the kingdom itself. The morning mist clung to the ancient stone walls of Valdoria Castle like ghostly fingers, reluctant to release their hold on the fortress that had stood for over 8 centuries. Captain Marcus Blackwood adjusted his ceremonial armor, the polished silver catching the pale dawn light that filtered through the tall Gothic windows of the eastern corridor. His boots echoed against the marble floors with practiced precision, each step a testament to 20 years of unwavering service to the crown. At 42, Marcus had seen 3 monarchs rule from the throne of Valdoria. He had served as a page boy to the late King Edmund, risen through the ranks under King Roland's reign, and now found himself as captain of the royal guard under the current King Theodore. But it was the newest addition to the royal family that had complicated everything. Queen Seraphina, the king's second wife, whose ambitions seemed to grow more dangerous with each passing day. The castle was already bustling with activity despite the early hour. Servants hurried through the corridors carrying silver trays laden with breakfast delicacies, their soft footsteps creating a gentle rhythm against the stone floors. The smell of fresh bread and honey cakes wafted from the royal kitchens, mixing with the ever-present scent of beeswax candles and ancient wood that permeated every corner of the castle. Marcus paused at the entrance to the great hall, observing the intricate tapestries that depicted the glorious history of Valdoria. His ancestors had served in these very halls, and their portraits lined the walls of the guards' quarters. The weight of tradition and honor sat heavily on his shoulders, but lately, that weight had begun to feel more like a burden than a blessing. Prince Louis, the king's son from his first marriage, was only 7 years old, yet already Marcus could see the intelligence and kindness that marked him as his father's true heir. The boy's mother, the beloved Queen Isabella, had died in a riding accident 3 years prior, leaving Louis vulnerable in a court that had quickly filled with new faces and hidden agendas. Queen Seraphina had arrived at court 18 months ago, a stunning beauty from the neighboring kingdom of Astoria. Her marriage to King Theodore had been swift and seemingly romantic, but Marcus had noticed things that others chose to ignore.
The way servants disappeared after questioning her orders.
The subtle changes in castle protocols that slowly isolated young Prince Louis from his father. The whispered conversations that ceased whenever Marcus approached. This morning felt different, though. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that made the hair on the back of Marcus's neck stand on end. He had learned to trust these instincts during his years of service, and they had never steered him wrong. As he made his way toward the prince's chambers for the morning's security briefing, Marcus encountered Sir Edmund Hawthorne, one of Queen Seraphina's personal advisors. The man had appeared at court shortly after the Queen's arrival, claiming to be a distant cousin from Astoria. He was thin and sharp-featured, with cold grey eyes that seemed to catalogue every weakness in those around him. "Captain Blackwood," Sir Edmund said, his voice smooth as silk, but carrying an undertone that always set Marcus on edge. "Her Majesty requests your presence in the blue drawing room at your earliest convenience." "I'll attend to Her Majesty after completing my morning rounds." "I believe she wishes to see you immediately," Sir Edmund pressed, his smile not reaching his eyes. "It concerns the young prince's education." The way he said education made Marcus's hand instinctively move toward his sword hilt. In the complex web of court politics, seemingly innocent words often carried dangerous meanings. "Very well," Marcus replied. "Lead the way." The blue drawing room was one of the smaller reception chambers in the castle, decorated in rich sapphire and gold. Queen Seraphina sat in an ornate chair near the fireplace, her auburn hair perfectly arranged and her emerald dress immaculate despite the early hour. She was undeniably beautiful, but Marcus had learned to see past beauty to the calculation that lived behind her violet eyes. "Captain Blackwood," she said, her voice melodious and warm, the perfect tone for someone who wanted to be loved by the common people. "Thank you for coming so promptly." "Your Majesty," Marcus replied, offering a respectful bow. "How may I serve?" The Queen stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the castle grounds, where early morning training was already underway. "I've been thinking about Prince Louis's future," she began. "The boy is 7 now, and his father believes it's time for him to begin more intensive preparation for his eventual role." Marcus remained silent, sensing that this conversation was heading somewhere he wouldn't like. King Theodore has decided, the Queen continued, turning back to face him, that Prince Louis would benefit from spending some time away from court. There's a fine monastery in the mountains, run by the Order of St. Benedine. The monks there are renowned for their scholarly pursuits and their ability to shape young minds. The monastery of St. Benedine. Marcus knew it well. It was indeed a place of learning, but it was also remote, isolated, and under the influence of clerics who owed their positions to Queen Seraphina's family connections. A place where a young prince might receive an education that would make him more pliable to certain influences. When does His Majesty plan to make this decision public? Marcus asked carefully. Queen Seraphina smiled, but there was something predatory in the expression. That's just it, Captain. His Majesty is currently away on diplomatic business in the southern provinces. He won't return for another month. But I've received word from him that the arrangement should begin immediately. The boy is to leave for the monastery tomorrow morning. Marcus felt his blood run cold. King Theodore had indeed traveled south, but he would never make such a decision about his beloved son without being present to see him off. Moreover, the king had spoken many times about wanting Louis to remain close, especially after losing his first wife. I would prefer to await His Majesty's return to confirm these orders directly, Marcus said, keeping his voice steady despite the alarm bells ringing in his mind. The Queen's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened. Captain, surely you're not questioning my authority to speak for my husband? The arrangements have already been made. Brother Francis from the monastery will arrive tomorrow at dawn to escort the prince. Your role will be to ensure that Prince Louis is ready for his journey and to provide safe passage to the monastery gates. Sir Edmund stepped forward from where he had been standing silently near the door. Her Majesty's instructions are quite clear, Captain. I trust there won't be any complications. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Marcus had served in the Royal Guard long enough to recognize when he was being maneuvered into a corner, but he had also served long enough to know when something was fundamentally wrong. Of course, Your Majesty, Marcus replied. I'll make the necessary preparations. As he left the blue drawing room, Marcus's mind was racing. Every instinct told him that this was not the king's decision, and that sending Prince Louis away now, while his father was absent, was the first move in a larger game. But proving his suspicions would be difficult, and acting against the Queen's orders without solid evidence would be tantamount to treason. He made his way through the castle's winding corridors, nodding to guards and servants while his thoughts churned. The morning sun had risen higher, casting longer shadows through the windows and illuminating the dust motes that danced in the ancient air. Prince Louis's chambers were in the eastern tower, a location chosen by his late mother for its view of the gardens she had loved. As Marcus approached, he could hear the boy's laughter, mixing with his tutor's patient voice. Master Geoffrey had been Louis's teacher for 2 years, a kind and scholarly man who had served the royal family faithfully. Marcus knocked gently on the door and entered to find Prince Louis bent over a map of the kingdom, his dark hair falling into his eyes as he traced the borders with his finger. The boy looked up with a bright smile that reminded Marcus painfully of Queen Isabella. "Captain Marcus!" Louis exclaimed, jumping up from his chair. "Master Geoffrey is showing me all the places father has visited. Look, he's been to the Whispering Woods and the Crystal Falls." "Good morning, Your Highness," Marcus replied, managing a smile, despite his inner turmoil. "I hope your studies are going well." Master Geoffrey stood and bowed. "The prince is an excellent student, Captain. Very eager to learn about his kingdom and its people." As Marcus looked at the innocent enthusiasm in Louis's eyes, he felt a fierce protective instinct surge through him. This child, who should be learning about the kingdom he would one day rule, was instead about to become a pawn in a dangerous political game. "Master Geoffrey," Marcus said carefully, "I need to discuss something with you privately." "Your Highness, perhaps you could practice your letters while we speak?" Louis nodded obediently and moved to his writing desk, where he began carefully forming letters on a piece of parchment. His tongue stuck out slightly in concentration, a habit that always made Marcus smile. Marcus led Master Geoffrey to the far corner of the room and spoke in low tones. "Queen Seraphina has informed me that Prince Louis is to leave for the monastery of St. Benedine tomorrow morning. Were you aware of these plans?" The tutor's face went pale. "The monastery? But Captain, His Majesty specifically told me that Louis was to continue his studies here at court. He said he wanted the boy close, especially after the Queen's influence began to grow." This confirmed Marcus's worst suspicions. King Theodore had not only not ordered this transfer, he had actively spoken against it. "Master Geoffrey," Marcus said urgently, "I need you to help me verify something." Do you still have correspondence with Brother Thomas at the southern monastery where the king is staying?
Yes, of course.
We exchange letters about historical manuscripts. Can you send a message immediately? I need to know if His Majesty has actually sent any orders regarding Prince Louis. Master Geoffrey nodded grimly. I understand, Captain. Give me 1 hour. As Marcus left the prince's chambers, his mind was already working through the possibilities. If his suspicions were correct, Queen Seraphina was making her move to remove Louis from court while the king was away. But why now? What had changed? The answer came to him as he walked past the throne room and saw workmen hanging new banners. The royal seal had been subtly altered. The traditional lion and crown now shared space with the Rose of Astoria, Queen Seraphina's family symbol. Small changes, but significant ones. She wasn't just trying to influence the kingdom, she was already marking it as partially hers. Marcus spent the next several hours going about his normal duties, while his mind raced with plans. He inspected the guard rotations, reviewed security protocols, and maintained the appearance of normalcy. But underneath the routine, he was preparing for what might become the most important decision of his life. By midday, Master Geoffrey found him in the armory and handed him a sealed letter. Brother Thomas's reply, he said simply. Marcus read the message twice, his jaw tightening with each word. King Theodore had sent no orders regarding Prince Louis. In fact, the king had specifically mentioned in his last letter to Brother Thomas that he was looking forward to returning to court to continue his son's education personally. The truth was now undeniable. Queen Seraphina was acting entirely on her own authority, which meant this was not just about the prince's education. This was about removing the rightful heir from court permanently. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus observed the castle with new eyes. He noticed which guards had been rotated to new positions. Coincidentally, many of those most loyal to the memory of Queen Isabella. He saw how certain servants now avoided eye contact, and how conversations stopped when he approached certain groups. The pieces of a larger conspiracy were becoming clear. But Marcus knew he was running out of time. Tomorrow morning, Prince Louis would be taken from the castle, and once he was gone, Marcus feared the boy might never return. That evening, as twilight painted the sky purple and gold, Marcus made his decision. He would not allow an innocent child to be used as a pawn in someone else's game for power, even if it meant defying direct orders from the Queen herself. The question now was not whether he would act, but how he would do it without putting Prince Louis in even greater danger. In a castle full of eyes and ears loyal to Queen Seraphina, planning a defiance of her orders would require all the skill and cunning Marcus had learned in 20 years of service. As night fell over Valdoria Castle, Captain Marcus Blackwood began to prepare for the most dangerous mission of his career, protecting his prince from those who should have been protecting him. The night air was thick with tension as Marcus Blackwood paced his quarters, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on the stone walls lined with weapons and memories of battles long past. His mind worked through every possible scenario, every potential ally, and every dangerous enemy that stood between him and protecting Prince Louis. Time was slipping away like sand through an hourglass, and by dawn the boy would be scheduled to leave for what Marcus now knew was essentially a prison disguised as a monastery. Through his narrow window, Marcus could see the guards making their rounds on the castle walls. Most were good men who had served faithfully for years, but recent changes in personnel had introduced uncertainty. Queen Seraphina had been subtle but thorough in placing her own people in key positions. It was a masterful political maneuver that had taken months to implement, and Marcus was only now beginning to see the full scope of her planning. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus's hand immediately went to his dagger before he recognized the pattern. 3 quick taps, followed by 2 slow ones. It was Master Geoffrey, using the old signal they had established years ago when discussing sensitive matters regarding Prince Louis's education. "Enter," Marcus called softly. The elderly tutor slipped into the room, his usually neat robes disheveled and his face pale with worry. "Captain, I've been thinking about our conversation. There's something else you should know." Marcus gestured for him to sit in a wooden chair near the small fireplace. The flames had died down to glowing embers, but they provided enough warmth to ward off the castle's persistent chill. 3 days ago, Master Geoffrey began, his voice barely above a whisper, I overheard a conversation between Queen Seraphina and Sir Edmund. I was returning some books to the library when I heard voices in the adjacent study. They were discussing the Louis problem and how removing him from court would make things significantly easier for their plans. Marcus leaned forward, his attention sharpening. What else did they say? Sir Edmund mentioned something about letters from Astoria and how the arrangements were progressing faster than expected. The Queen seemed pleased but warned him about moving too quickly. She said, "We must be patient. The kingdom will be ours, but it must appear legitimate." The words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. This wasn't just about removing Prince Louis from the line of succession. This was about a complete takeover of the kingdom. Queen Seraphina wasn't content to be a stepmother to the heir. She wanted to ensure her own eventual children would inherit the throne.
Master Geoffrey, Marcus said carefully, how many people in the castle do you trust completely?
The old tutor considered the question seriously. Fewer than I would like, but more than none. Sarah, the head cook, has been here since before Queen Isabella's time. She adores Prince Louis and would do anything to protect him. Thomas, the stablemaster, is also completely loyal to the memory of the late Queen and to the prince. And there's young Emma, Prince Louis's nursemaid. She's been with him since he was 3 and is utterly devoted to the boy. What about the guards? Sergeant William Hartwell is absolutely trustworthy. He served under your predecessor and has always been suspicious of the changes since Queen Seraphina arrived. And there's Lieutenant James Morrison. He was one of Queen Isabella's personal guards and requested to continue serving Prince Louis after her death. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. These were people he knew well, men and women who had proven their loyalty time and again. But involving them in what he was planning would put them at enormous risk. There's something else, Master Geoffrey continued. I've been corresponding with several monasteries in the region, maintaining relationships for the Royal Library's manuscript collection. I sent discreet inquiries to some of my contacts about the Order of St. Benedine. The responses were troubling. He reached into his robes and withdrew a small bundle of letters. Brother Albert from the Monastery of St. Marcus wrote that the Order of St. Benedine has been receiving significant donations from Astoria in recent months. More importantly, he mentioned that several young nobles from various kingdoms have been sent there for education and have never returned to court. Their families are told they've chosen religious life, but Brother Albert has his doubts. The implications were staggering. The monastery wasn't just a place to educate and influence young nobles. It was where inconvenient heirs simply disappeared. We have to stop this, Marcus said, his voice firm with resolve. But we need to be smart about it. If we simply refuse to hand over Prince Louis tomorrow, we'll be arrested for treason, and the Queen will find another way to achieve her goals. Marcus stood and began pacing again, his mind working through the possibilities. We need to create a situation where Queen Seraphina's plans are exposed, but we also need to protect Louis until his father returns.
How do you propose we do that? Before Marcus could answer, another knock came at the door.
This time it was the rapid, urgent pattern used for emergencies. Marcus opened the door to find Emma, Prince Louis's young nursemaid, her eyes wide with fear and her hands shaking. "Captain Blackwood," she whispered urgently, "you must come quickly. Something's happening in the prince's chambers." Marcus grabbed his sword and followed Emma through the castle corridors, Master Geoffrey close behind. The stone floors seemed to echo their footsteps louder than usual, and the shadows cast by the wall torches appeared more menacing. As they approached the eastern tower, Marcus could hear voices coming from the direction of Louis's rooms. They crept closer and pressed themselves against the wall near the prince's door. Through the slightly open door, Marcus could see Queen Seraphina inside the chamber, speaking in low, soothing tones to someone. "Don't worry, dear Louis," she was saying. "This medicine will help you sleep peacefully tonight. Tomorrow is a big day, and you'll need your rest for the journey." Marcus's blood ran cold. She was drugging the boy to ensure he couldn't resist or call for help during the morning's departure. The realization that Queen Seraphina was personally involved in this level of deception confirmed his worst fears about her intentions. "I don't feel sleepy, stepmother," came Prince Louis's young voice, already sounding drowsy. "And I don't understand why I have to go away. Father never mentioned anything about a monastery." "Your father wants what's best for you," Queen Seraphina replied smoothly. "The monks will teach you so many wonderful things. You'll learn about the world beyond the castle walls." Marcus couldn't wait any longer. He pushed the door open and stepped into the room, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I wasn't expecting to find you here so late." Queen Seraphina turned with a start, and for just a moment, Marcus saw something dangerous flash in her eyes. Before she composed herself, "Captain Blackwood, I was simply saying good night to Louis and ensuring he was prepared for tomorrow's departure." Prince Louis was sitting up in bed, but his eyes were heavy and unfocused. The effects of whatever she had given him were already taking hold. "Captain Marcus," the boy said sleepily, Do you know why I have to go away? Before Marcus could answer, Queen Seraphina stepped between them. The prince needs his rest, Captain. Perhaps you could return tomorrow morning for the departure. Actually, Your Majesty, I've received some concerning information that I believe you should know about immediately. Marcus met her gaze steadily. It relates to the security of the monastery and whether it's truly safe for Prince Louis. He was improvising, but he needed to create enough doubt to delay the departure until he could implement a plan. Queen Seraphina's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her composed expression. What kind of security concerns? Reports of bandits in the mountain passes near the monastery. I would recommend postponing the journey until we can send advance scouts to ensure the route is safe. How convenient, Sir Edmund's voice came from behind them. Marcus turned to see the thin man entering the room, flanked by two guards Marcus didn't recognize. Captain Blackwood suddenly developed security concerns on the very night before the prince's departure. The situation was rapidly becoming more dangerous. Marcus realized that Queen Seraphina and Sir Edmund had anticipated potential resistance and come prepared with their own guards. He glanced at Master Geoffrey and Emma, both of whom looked terrified, but determined. Sir Edmund, Marcus said calmly, I'm sure you understand that the safety of Prince Louis is my primary responsibility. Any threat to his well-being must be taken seriously. Of course, Queen Seraphina said, her voice taking on a harder edge. But I'm confident that Brother Francis and his escort will provide adequate protection. The arrangements cannot be changed at this late hour. Prince Louis, fighting against the drowsiness, tried to sit up straighter. I want to wait for Father to come home, he said, his words slightly slurred. He should know about this journey. Your father has already given his approval, dear one, Queen Seraphina said, moving to the bedside and gently pushing the boy back against his pillows. Now sleep. Morning will come soon enough. Marcus watched as the prince's eyes fluttered closed, the drug taking full effect. The sight of the innocent child being manipulated so callously filled him with a cold rage that he struggled to control. I'll post guards outside the prince's chambers tonight, Marcus announced, for security purposes. That won't be necessary, Sir Edmund replied quickly. I've already arranged for appropriate security. The two groups faced each other in tense silence, the air thick with unspoken threats. Marcus knew that if he backed down now, Prince Louis would be gone by morning, and there would be no way to prove what had really happened. But if he pushed too hard without support, he might find himself arrested or worse. Very well, Marcus said finally. But I insist on personally inspecting the travel arrangements in the morning before departure. Of course, Captain, Queen Seraphina said with false sweetness. I would expect nothing less from someone so dedicated to his duties. As they all filed out of the prince's chamber, Marcus caught Emma's eye and gave her a subtle signal. The nursemaid nodded slightly, understanding that she should stay close and watch over Louis during the night. Back in the corridor, Marcus felt the weight of the conspiracy pressing down on him. Every hour that passed brought them closer to a point of no return. He needed to act, but he also needed to be smart about it. Sir Edmund, he said as they walked, might I have a word regarding tomorrow's escort procedures? The thin man studied him suspiciously but nodded. Of course, Captain. They stopped in a small alcove, and Marcus lowered his voice. I know what you're really doing, and I know that King Theodore never authorized this transfer. Sir Edmund's mask of civility slipped slightly. Captain Blackwood, I think the pressures of your position may be affecting your judgment. Perhaps it's time you considered a transfer to a less demanding post. Is that a threat? It's friendly advice. The kingdom is changing, Captain. Those who adapt will find themselves rewarded. Those who resist, he let the sentence hang in the air. Marcus smiled grimly. I've served this kingdom for 20 years, Sir Edmund. I've seen changes before. They don't usually last. As they parted ways, Marcus knew that the lines had been drawn. There would be no more pretense, no more subtle maneuvering. Tomorrow would bring a direct confrontation, and he needed to be ready. Returning to his quarters, Marcus began to formulate a desperate but necessary plan. He would need to move quickly and rely on people he trusted completely. The alternative, allowing Prince Louis to disappear into the mountains, was unthinkable. He pulled out parchment and began writing carefully coded messages to Sergeant Hartwell, Lieutenant Morrison, and the others Master Geoffrey had mentioned. The messages were disguised as routine duty assignments, but those who received them would understand their true meaning. As he worked, Marcus thought about the oath he had sworn when he became captain of the Royal Guard. He had pledged to protect the royal family with his life, to serve the kingdom faithfully, and to uphold justice and honor. Tomorrow he might have to choose between following orders and following his conscience. The decision, however, had already been made. Prince Louis was the rightful heir to the throne, an innocent child who deserved protection from those who would use him for their own purposes. Even if it cost Marcus everything, he would not allow the boy to become a victim of palace intrigue. Outside his window, the first hint of dawn was beginning to lighten the eastern sky. In a few hours, Brother Francis would arrive to collect Prince Louis, and Queen Seraphina would expect her plans to proceed smoothly. She was about to discover that Captain Marcus Blackwood had other ideas. Dawn crept over Valdoria Castle, like a reluctant witness to the events about to unfold. The morning mist hung heavy in the courtyard, muffling sounds and creating ghostly shapes that seemed to move and shift in the pale light. Captain Marcus Blackwood stood at his window, watching as the castle began to stir to life, knowing that this day would either save Prince Louis or destroy everything Marcus had worked for throughout his career. The messages he had sent during the night had been received and understood. Sergeant Hartwell had subtly repositioned loyal guards at key locations throughout the castle. Lieutenant Morrison had quietly arranged for trusted men to be on duty in the stables and at the main gates. Sarah, the head cook, had prepared a special breakfast for Prince Louis, one that would help counteract the effects of whatever Queen Seraphina had given the boy the night before. Marcus dressed carefully in his full ceremonial armor, each piece polished to perfection. If this was to be his last day as captain of the Royal Guard, he would meet it with dignity and honor. The weight of the armor was familiar and comforting, like an old friend preparing to stand beside him in battle. A soft knock at his door announced Emma's arrival. The young nursemaid looked exhausted but determined, her usually neat appearance disheveled from a sleepless night of watching over Prince Louis. "How is he?" Marcus asked immediately. "Groggy but awakening," Emma reported. "Whatever she gave him was strong, but Sarah's herbal tea is helping to clear his head. He's asking questions about why he feels so strange." "Good. Is he strong enough to travel if necessary?" Emma nodded. "I believe so, Captain, but he's frightened and confused. He keeps asking for his father." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. The boy's trust and innocence made this situation even more infuriating. "Tell him that everything will be all right, and that I'll be with him shortly." As Emma left, Marcus made his final preparations. Hidden beneath his armor, he carried a letter he had written during the dark hours before dawn. It was addressed to King Theodore, and contained everything Marcus knew about Queen Seraphina's conspiracy. If something happened to him, at least the truth would eventually reach the king. The castle corridors buzzed with unusual activity as Marcus made his way toward the Great Hall. Servants whispered in corners, and there was a tension in the air that suggested everyone sensed something significant was about to happen. Word traveled fast in a place like Valdoria Castle, and by now, many people knew that Prince Louis was scheduled to leave for the monastery. In the Great Hall, Marcus found Queen Seraphina already present, dressed in an elegant burgundy gown that made her look every inch the regal monarch. She was speaking quietly with Sir Edmund, and a man Marcus didn't recognize, presumably Brother Francis, from the monastery. The monk was a large, imposing figure with cold eyes and hands that looked more suited to wielding weapons than handling prayer books. "Ah, Captain Blackwood," Queen Seraphina called as she noticed his approach. "Perfect timing. Brother Francis has just arrived to collect Prince Louis." Marcus studied the monk carefully. Something about the man seemed wrong. His posture was too rigid, his eyes too alert, and there were calluses on his hands that spoke of sword work rather than scholarly pursuits. "Brother Francis," Marcus said with a formal bow, "I trust your journey from the monastery was pleasant?" "Pleasant enough," the man replied, his voice rough and lacking the gentle cadence Marcus associated with true religious men. "I'm eager to return with the boy. The road can be dangerous, and I prefer to travel during daylight hours. But first, I'll need to inspect your credentials and escort arrangements, as is standard protocol for any member of the royal family leaving the castle." Brother Francis exchanged a quick glance with Sir Edmund. "Surely that's unnecessary. Queen Seraphina has already verified everything." "I'm afraid protocol is protocol," Marcus replied firmly. "I'll also need to confirm the arrangements directly with King Theodore before allowing Prince Louis to leave." The tension in the room ratcheted up several degrees. Queen Seraphina's composure flickered for just a moment before she regained control. "Captain, I've already told you that His Majesty has approved these arrangements. Are you questioning my authority?" "Not at all, Your Majesty. I'm simply following established security procedures. Surely you understand that the safety of Prince Louis requires thorough verification of anyone who wishes to take him from the castle." Sir Edmund stepped forward, his thin face twisted with irritation. "Captain Blackwood, your obstruction of Her Majesty's clearly stated orders is beginning to look like insubordination." Before Marcus could respond, Master Geoffrey entered the hall, moving with more urgency than his usual scholarly pace would suggest. "Your Majesty, Captain Blackwood," he said with appropriate bows. "I've just received an urgent message from the southern provinces." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. This wasn't part of their plan, but Master Joffrey's expression suggested important news. "What kind of message?" Queen Seraphina asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Master Joffrey held up a scroll sealed with the royal seal. "It's from His Majesty, King Theodore. He's returning to the castle immediately due to urgent matters of state. He should arrive within 2 days." The scroll was genuine. Marcus recognized the king's personal seal and the handwriting of his secretary. But the timing was incredibly suspicious. Either this was an extraordinary coincidence, or Master Joffrey had somehow arranged for this message to arrive at exactly the right moment. Queen Seraphina's face went pale. "That's unexpected. His Majesty wasn't scheduled to return for another month. Apparently there have been developments in the southern negotiations that require his immediate attention," Master Joffrey replied smoothly. "The message specifically mentions that he wishes to spend time with Prince Louis upon his return, as he's been missing his son terribly." Brother Francis cleared his throat impatiently. "This doesn't change our arrangements. The boy can return from the monastery when his father wishes to see him." "Actually," Marcus interjected, "given that His Majesty will be returning so soon, and specifically wishes to see Prince Louis, it would be inappropriate to send the prince away now. I'm sure the monastery can accommodate a brief delay." The fake monk's jaw tightened. "The arrangements have been made. Postponing now would be difficult." "I'm sure the Holy Brothers will understand," Marcus replied with false pleasantness. "After all, a father's wish to see his son should take precedence over educational schedules." Queen Seraphina was clearly struggling to maintain control of the situation. Marcus could see the calculations running behind her eyes as she tried to find a way to salvage her plans. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "Prince Louis could begin his journey and return when his father arrives." "It would be a shame to waste Brother Francis's time." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," a new voice said from the entrance to the hall. Everyone turned to see Sergeant Hartwell approaching with Lieutenant Morrison and 2 other guards. "Captain Blackwood, we've discovered something that requires your immediate attention." Marcus felt a surge of hope. His men had clearly found something that could help expose the conspiracy. "What is it, Sergeant?" Hartwell held up a small leather pouch. "We found this in Brother Francis's saddlebags while conducting our routine security inspection. It contains a significant amount of gold coins, all bearing the seal of Astoria." Brother Francis started forward angrily. "How dare you search my belongings without permission?" "Standard security protocol for anyone entering or leaving the castle with a member of the royal family," Lieutenant Morrison replied calmly. "We also found these." He held up a set of shackles and a small vial of clear liquid. The hall erupted in shocked murmurs from the servants and guards who had gathered to witness Prince Louis's departure. The evidence was damning. No legitimate monk would carry shackles and mysterious potions. Queen Seraphina's mask finally slipped completely. "This is preposterous! Those items could have been planted." "By whom, Your Majesty?" Marcus asked pointedly. "And why would a holy brother need restraints and unknown substances for escorting a willing student to a monastery?" Brother Francis suddenly lunged toward the door, but Sergeant Hartwell and his men were ready. They subdued the false monk quickly and efficiently, revealing the weapons concealed beneath his robes. "It seems," Marcus announced loudly enough for everyone in the hall to hear, "that someone has been planning to abduct Prince Louis under the guise of sending him for religious education." Sir Edmund was backing toward another exit, but Lieutenant Morrison moved to block his path. "I think you should stay and help us understand how this conspiracy was organized, Sir Edmund." The thin man's composure cracked completely. "You have no proof of any conspiracy." "This is all circumstantial evidence." "Perhaps," Marcus agreed. "But I think King Theodore will be very interested in investigating these circumstances thoroughly when he returns." At that moment, Emma appeared at the top of the grand staircase holding Prince Louis's hand. The boy looked pale and unsteady, but alert enough to understand that something important was happening. "Captain Marcus," Louis called down to the hall, "Emma says there are bad men who wanted to take me away from father." The innocent question hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus looked up at the boy, the rightful heir to the throne, the son of a beloved queen, a child who deserved protection and love rather than manipulation and betrayal. "Don't worry, Your Highness," Marcus replied clearly. "The bad men have been caught. You're safe now." Queen Seraphina made one final attempt to regain control. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. Captain Blackwood has clearly overreacted to a simple educational arrangement. Your Majesty, Master Geoffrey spoke up, producing another scroll. I think you should know that I've also received responses to my inquiries about the Order of St. Benedine. It seems that several young nobles who were sent there for education have never been heard from again. The evidence was overwhelming and everyone in the hall could see it. Queen Seraphina's carefully constructed plan was collapsing around her, exposed by the very people she had underestimated. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying the authority of 20 years of loyal service. Your Majesty, until King Theodore returns to sort out these allegations, I'm placing you under house arrest for conspiracy against the crown. Sir Edmund and this false monk will be held in the dungeon pending the king's judgment. You can't do this! Queen Seraphina shrieked, her composure finally shattering completely. I am the queen. I have authority here. You have authority given to you by King Theodore, Marcus replied firmly. And that authority does not include the right to endanger his son or conspire against the crown. As his men moved to escort the conspirators from the hall, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. He had successfully protected Prince Louis, but he had also defied the Queen's direct orders and essentially staged a coup against her authority. When King Theodore returned, Marcus would have to face the consequences of his actions. But as he looked up at Prince Louis, who was now smiling and waving at him with childish excitement at the dramatic events, Marcus knew he had made the right choice. Some things were more important than following orders, and protecting innocence was at the top of that list. The morning sun had finally burned away the mist, and bright light streamed through the hall's tall windows. For the first time in months, Baldoria Castle felt like it might truly be safe again. The hours following Queen Seraphina's arrest passed in a blur of activity and tension that seemed to permeate every stone of Baldoria Castle. Captain Marcus Blackwood found himself in the unprecedented position of essentially ruling the castle in the absence of the king, a responsibility that weighed heavily on his shoulders as he worked to maintain order while uncovering the full extent of the conspiracy that had nearly cost Prince Louis his freedom. In the dungeon beneath the castle, the interrogation of the false monk had revealed disturbing details about the plot. Under pressure from Sergeant Hartwell's questioning, the man whose real name was Victor Grimm, a mercenary from the northern borderlands, had confessed to being hired by Astorian agents. His orders were simple but chilling: transport Prince Louis to a remote location in the mountains where the boy would be held indefinitely, far from any hope of rescue or return to his father. Master Geoffrey had proven invaluable in documenting the evidence and coordinating with contacts throughout the kingdom. His scholarly network had provided crucial information about similar disappearances in other courts, painting a picture of a larger conspiracy that extended far beyond Valdoria's borders. The Order of St. Benedine, it turned out, was not merely complicit but central to a network of false monasteries used to eliminate inconvenient heirs across multiple kingdoms. Prince Louis, meanwhile, had been placed under the protective care of Emma and Sarah, with trusted guards maintaining constant watch over the Eastern Tower. The boy had recovered from the effects of the drug Queen Seraphina had given him, but he remained confused and frightened by the events swirling around him. Marcus made it a point to visit the prince several times throughout the day, offering reassurance and trying to explain the situation in terms a 7-year-old could understand. Captain Marcus, Louis had asked during one of these visits, his young face serious with concern, why did my stepmother want to send me away? Did I do something wrong? How could he explain to an innocent child that the woman who should have been protecting him had instead been planning his disappearance? In the end, he had simply knelt beside the boy's chair and said, "You did nothing wrong, Your Highness. Sometimes grown-ups make very bad decisions, but your father and I will always protect you." As the day progressed, Marcus found himself dealing with the complex political ramifications of his actions. Word of Queen Seraphina's arrest had spread throughout the castle and beyond, carried by servants, traders, and messengers to the surrounding towns and villages. The reactions were mixed. While many expressed relief that Prince Louis was safe, others worried about the implications of a guard captain arresting the Queen. Sir Edmund, during his own interrogation, had proven more resistant than Victor Grimm, maintaining his innocence and demanding to be released immediately. However, Lieutenant Morrison had discovered a cache of documents hidden in the man's chambers that told a different story. Letters written in coded language, detailed payments from Astoria, plans for removing obstacles to Queen Seraphina's influence, and most damaging of all, a draft agreement that would have effectively made Valdoria a vassal state of Astoria once Queen Seraphina produced an heir. The scope of the conspiracy was breathtaking. This wasn't just about eliminating Prince Louis, it was about the complete subjugation of the kingdom. Queen Seraphina's marriage to King Theodore had been arranged not for love or even political alliance, but as part of a long-term plan to absorb Valdoria into Astoria's growing empire. As evening approached, Marcus called a meeting of the senior castle staff and loyal guards in the war room. The chamber, with its massive oak table and maps of the kingdom covering the walls, had witnessed countless important discussions throughout Valdoria's history. Tonight, it would host what might be one of the most crucial conversations in the castle's 800-year existence. "We have a problem," Marcus began without preamble, as the assembled group took their seats. "Queen Seraphina's conspiracy was more extensive than we initially realized. We've identified at least 12 people within the castle who were working directly or indirectly for Astorian interests." Sergeant Hartwell leaned forward, his weathered face grim. "What's our current security status, Captain?" "We've secured the immediate threats, but we can't know how many other agents remain hidden. More importantly, we need to consider what happens when news of these events reaches Astoria itself. King Theodore is still 2 days away, and we may face external threats before he returns." Master Joffrey cleared his throat nervously. "Captain, I've received some concerning messages from my contacts in the surrounding regions. There are reports of armed men gathering in the forest near the Astorian border. They could be bandits, but the timing seems suspicious." The implication was clear. Queen Seraphina's allies might attempt to rescue, or, worse, a direct assault on the castle to silence the witnesses and complete their original mission. "How many men do we have that we can trust completely?" Marcus asked Sergeant Hartwell. 37 guards that I would stake my life on," the sergeant replied promptly. "Another 23 that are probably loyal but haven't been thoroughly tested. The rest," he shrugged grimly. Marcus studied the map of the castle and its surroundings. With fewer than 40 completely reliable men, defending against a determined assault would be challenging, especially if they face coordinated attacks from both outside and inside the walls. "Sarah," he addressed the head cook, "how are our food supplies and water situation?" The elderly woman, who had remained remarkably calm throughout the crisis, replied thoughtfully, "We can sustain the castle for several weeks if necessary, Captain. I've already taken the precaution of securing the stores and testing everything for tampering."
Good thinking.
"Emma, how is Prince Louis handling everything?" The young nursemaid looked exhausted but determined. "He's frightened but trying to be brave, Captain. He keeps asking when his father will return and whether he'll be safe until then." Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on his shoulders. Every decision he made in the coming hours could affect not only Prince Louis's safety, but the future of the entire kingdom. "There's something else," Lieutenant Morrison spoke up. "During our search of Queen Seraphina's private chambers, we found this." He placed a small wooden box on the table and opened it to reveal several vials of clear liquid, similar to the one found with Victor Grimm. Master Geoffrey examined the vials carefully. "This appears to be extract of nightshade, mixed with other substances. In small doses, it would cause drowsiness and confusion. In larger doses, he didn't need to finish the sentence." The realization that Queen Seraphina had been slowly poisoning Prince Louis, or at least drugging him regularly, added another layer of horror to the conspiracy. Marcus wondered how long this had been going on and what other subtle harm had been inflicted on the boy. A commotion outside the war room interrupted their discussion. One of the guards burst in, his face flushed from running. "Captain," he gasped, "there are riders approaching the main gate. They're flying Astarian banners and demanding to speak with Queen Seraphina immediately." The external threat they had feared was materializing even faster than expected. "How many riders?" 20 visible, sir, but there could be more in the tree line. They're armed and look like professional soldiers rather than diplomats." The captain rose and addressed the room. "This is it. Sergeant Hartwell, initiate full defensive protocols. Lieutenant Morrison, double the guard on Prince Louis and move him to the most secure chambers in the castle. Master Geoffrey, destroy any documents that could compromise our loyal allies if the castle falls. Sarah, prepare to seal the food stores." As the group dispersed to carry out their orders, Marcus felt the familiar calm that came over him before battle. This was what he had trained for throughout his career, the moment when everything depended on clear thinking, quick decisions, and unwavering courage. He made his way to the castle's battlements, where he could observe the Astorian force gathered outside the gates. In the fading daylight, he could see that the guards' estimate had been conservative. There were at least 30 mounted warriors, with more movement in the surrounding forest suggesting additional troops. The leader of the Astorian force rode forward and called up to the walls. "I am Commander Aldrich Voss, representative of King Roderick of Astoria. I demand to speak with Queen Seraphina immediately. We have reports of sedition and unlawful imprisonment within these walls." Marcus stepped forward where he could be seen. "I am Captain Marcus Blackwood, commander of the Royal Guard of Valdoria. Queen Seraphina has been arrested on charges of treason and conspiracy against the crown. She is being held pending the return of King Theodore." Commander Voss's response was immediate and hostile. "You exceed your authority, Captain. Release Queen Seraphina immediately, or face the consequences." "I'm afraid that's not possible, Commander. Queen Seraphina will answer for her crimes before King Theodore and the royal court." There was a long pause as the two commanders studied each other across the castle's walls. Marcus could see the calculation in Voss's eyes as the Astorian weighed his options. "Captain Blackwood," Voss called finally, "you are harboring a subject of King Roderick who has been falsely accused. Astoria will not tolerate such treatment of its people. I give you 1 hour to release Queen Seraphina and surrender those responsible for her mistreatment." Marcus felt a cold smile cross his lips. "Commander Voss, Queen Seraphina became a subject of Valdoria when she married King Theodore. As for surrendering anyone, I suggest you withdraw your forces immediately, or you'll be the one facing consequences when King Theodore returns with the royal army." It was a bluff, but Marcus hoped it would buy them time. King Theodore was indeed returning, but with only a small diplomatic escort, not a military force. As the Astorian commander wheeled his horse and rode back to his forces, Marcus knew they had perhaps an hour before the assault began. The next few hours would determine not only the fate of Prince Louis, but potentially the independence of the entire kingdom. Behind him, the castle was transforming into a fortress. Guards took positions on the walls. Arrows were distributed to defensive positions, and the great gates were reinforced with additional timber and iron. In the midst of the organized chaos, Marcus caught sight of Prince Louis at an upper window, with Emma standing protectively beside him. The boy waved when he saw Marcus looking up, and the captain raised his hand in acknowledgement. Whatever happened in the coming battle, Marcus was determined that Prince Louis would survive to take his rightful place as king. Even if it meant sacrificing everything else, including his own life, the future of Valdoria would be protected. The hour passed with agonizing slowness as Valdoria Castle prepared for siege. From his position on the battlements, Captain Marcus Blackwood watched the Astorian forces organize themselves with military precision that spoke of extensive planning. This wasn't a hastily assembled rescue mission. Commander Aldrich Voss had brought a professional assault force equipped with ladders, grappling hooks, and what appeared to be a small battering ram designed for castle gates. The realization that Astoria had been prepared for exactly this scenario sent a chill down Marcus's spine. Queen Seraphina's conspiracy had included contingency plans for every possible outcome, including the possibility that her plot might be discovered. The question now was whether Marcus and his loyal defenders could hold out long enough for King Theodore to return, or whether help might arrive from other quarters. As if summoned by his thoughts, Sergeant Hartwell appeared at his side, breathing heavily from his preparations. "The castle is as ready as we can make it, Captain," he reported. "All loyal guards are in position, the gates are reinforced, and we've secured all possible entry points. Lieutenant Morrison has Prince Louis in the central keep's most protected chamber, with our 6 best men standing guard." Marcus nodded, his eyes never leaving the Astorian forces. "Any word from the messenger I sent to Lord Edmund's estate?" Lord Edmund Fairfax, whose lands bordered the castle's territory, had been a close friend of King Theodore's father, and might provide military assistance if he received word of the crisis in time. Marcus had dispatched a rider at dawn, hoping against hope that help might arrive before the situation became desperate. "No word yet, sir, but it's still early." A horn blast from the Astorian camp announced that the hour of negotiation had ended. Commander Voss rode forward again, this time accompanied by several of his lieutenants and a figure that made Marcus's blood run cold. Sir Edmund, who had somehow escaped from the dungeons. "Captain Blackwood," Voss called up to the walls. "As you can see, Sir Edmund has informed us of the true situation within your walls. Your illegal detention of Queen Seraphina and your refusal to recognize her lawful authority constitute acts of rebellion against the legitimate government of this kingdom." Marcus felt a surge of anger at seeing Sir Edmund free and clearly in league with the Astorian forces. The man's escape meant that security within the castle was even more compromised than Marcus had realized. "Sir Edmund is a traitor who conspired to kidnap Prince Louis," Marcus shouted back. "His freedom doesn't change the charges against Queen Seraphina or the evidence of Astorian interference in Valdorian affairs." Sir Edmund himself spoke up, his thin voice carrying clearly in the evening air. "Captain Blackwood, you have been deceived by false evidence and treasonous advisers. Queen Seraphina's only crime was trying to provide Prince Louis with proper education befitting his station. Your paranoid interpretations have created this crisis. The audacity of the man's lies was breathtaking." But Marcus knew that debate was pointless now. The Astorians had committed themselves to a course of action that could only end in violence. "This is your final opportunity, Captain," Commander Voss announced. "Surrender Queen Seraphina and submit to Astorian authority, or face the consequences of your rebellion." Marcus drew his sword and raised it high above his head, the steel gleaming in the torchlight. "Valdoria stands free and will remain free. Come and take it if you can." A cheer rose from the castle's defenders as they saw their captain's defiant gesture. It might be a hopeless fight, but they would face it with honor and courage. The Astorian response was swift and professional. Commander Voss wheeled his horse and galloped back to his forces, and within minutes the assault began. Archers sent volleys of arrows toward the castle walls, while assault teams advanced with their ladders and equipment. The battering ram, carried by 8 men, thundered toward the main gate with purposeful determination. Marcus moved along the battlements, directing his archers' fire and calling out encouragement to his men. The defenders were outnumbered, but they held the advantage of position and intimate knowledge of the castle's defenses. Every archer's shot was calculated, every dropped stone carefully aimed. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably less than one. The Astorians managed to get several ladders against the walls, but each attempt to scale them was beaten back by determined defenders. The battering ram reached the main gate and began its work, but the reinforcements Marcus had ordered held firm against the assault. Just when Marcus began to think they might actually hold out until dawn, disaster struck from an unexpected quarter. Flames suddenly erupted from the castle's eastern wing, the section that housed Prince Louis's protective chamber. "Fire!" someone screamed. And Marcus felt his heart stop as he realized what was happening. There were still Astorian agents within the castle walls, and they had chosen the perfect moment to create chaos and threaten Prince Louis directly. "Sergeant Hartwell!" Marcus shouted above the din of battle. "Take command of the wall defenses. I'm going after the prince." Marcus sprinted across the courtyard, dodging arrows and falling stones as he made his way toward the burning tower. The flames were spreading rapidly, fed by the ancient timber and tapestries that filled the castle's interior. Smoke billowed from windows, creating a hellish scene that seemed to mock all his efforts to protect the boy. As he burst through the door leading to the eastern wing, Marcus found chaos. Servants were running with buckets of water, trying desperately to contain the blaze, while guards shouted conflicting orders. Through the smoke and confusion, Marcus spotted Lieutenant Morrison. "Where is Prince Louis?" Marcus demanded. Morrison's face was black with soot and streaked with sweat. "We moved him to the central chamber as planned, but the fire has cut off our usual routes. We'll have to go through the old servants' passages to reach him." The 2 men plunged deeper into the castle, navigating passages that Marcus had learned as a young guard but rarely used in recent years. The smoke was getting thicker, making breathing difficult and visibility almost impossible. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of battle continuing as the Astorians pressed their attack on multiple fronts. They finally reached the central chamber to find Emma huddled with Prince Louis in the corner, while 4 guards maintained defensive positions around them. The room was relatively safe from the fire, but smoke was beginning to seep in through the cracks around the door. "Captain Marcus!" Prince Louis cried out when he saw them, running across the room and throwing his small arms around the captain's waist. "Emma says the castle is burning. Are we going to die?" Marcus knelt down and looked the boy directly in the eyes, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "No, Your Highness. We're going to get you out of here safely. I promise." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus realized how difficult that promise would be to keep. The fire was spreading, the Astorians were still assaulting the outer defenses, and they were trapped in the heart of a burning castle with limited options for escape. "There's a passage," Emma spoke up suddenly. "My grandmother used to work in this castle when she was young, and she told me stories about secret tunnels that connected to the old wine cellars. From there, we might be able to reach the postern gate." Marcus had heard rumors of such passages but had never explored them personally. However, with their conventional routes blocked by fire and enemies, it might be their only chance. "Show us," he commanded. Emma led them to a section of the chamber's wall where a tapestry depicting King Theodore's coronation hung from floor to ceiling. Behind the tapestry, she revealed a narrow door that looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. "The passages are narrow and old," Emma warned. "I don't know what condition they're in. We don't have a choice." Marcus replied grimly. Lieutenant Morrison, you and 2 guards will escort Prince Louis and Emma through the passages. I'll take the other 2 and try to create a distraction that might help cover your escape. Prince Louis grabbed Marcus's hand with both of his small ones. Come with us, Captain Marcus, please. The boy's plea tore at Marcus's heart, but he knew his duty. I have to help defend the castle, Your Highness. But Lieutenant Morrison will take good care of you, and your father will be here soon. As they prepared to separate, the sound of the battle outside suddenly changed. The clash of weapons and shouts of men were joined by new sounds, the thunder of hoofbeats and war cries in a different language. Marcus rushed to the chamber's narrow window and peered out through the smoke. In the courtyard below, he could see new forces engaged with the Astorians, men wearing the colors of Lord Edmund Fairfax's household. The messenger had gotten through, and reinforcements had arrived just when they were needed most. The tide is turning, Marcus announced to his companions, but we still need to get Prince Louis to safety. The group split as planned, with Lieutenant Morrison leading the Prince and Emma into the dark passages, while Marcus and his remaining guards prepared to rejoin the battle. As he watched the small party disappear into the ancient tunnels, Marcus felt a mixture of hope and fear. So much depended on the next few minutes. Fighting their way through smoke-filled corridors, Marcus and his guards eventually reached the main courtyard, where the battle was now raging on multiple fronts. Lord Fairfax's forces had struck the Astorians from behind, creating confusion and panic among the attackers. The battering ram had been abandoned as its crew fled or fell to defending arrows. Commander Voss, seeing his carefully planned assault falling apart, made one final desperate gambit. Marcus watched in horror as the Astorian commander gathered a small group of his best men and charged directly toward the postern gate, the same gate where Lieutenant Morrison would be emerging with Prince Louis. Without hesitation, Marcus sprinted across the courtyard, dodging battle-mad combatants and leaping over fallen bodies. He had to reach the postern gate before Voss, or everything they had sacrificed would be for nothing. The race was desperate and close, but Marcus arrived at the gate just as it swung open from the inside. Lieutenant Morrison emerged first, his sword drawn and his eyes scanning for threats. Behind him came Emma, carrying Prince Louis in her arms. "Look out!" Marcus shouted as Commander Voss and his men came charging around the corner. What followed was the most intense fight of Marcus's career. Outnumbered 5-3, he and his companions fought with the desperation of men protecting something more precious than their own lives. Steel rang against steel in the narrow space, and Marcus found himself face to face with Commander Voss himself. The Astorian commander was skilled and dangerous, but he was fighting for conquest while Marcus was fighting for love and loyalty. In the end, that made all the difference. Marcus's blade found its mark, and Voss fell with a look of surprise on his face. With their commander dead, and Lord Fairfax's forces pressing them from behind, the remaining Astorians broke and fled. The battle was over, but the cost had been high. Several brave guards had given their lives, and much of the castle's eastern wing lay in ruins. As dawn broke over Valdoria Castle, Marcus found himself sitting on the steps of the Great Hall, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Prince Louis sat beside him, no longer the frightened child of the night before, but a boy who had witnessed courage and sacrifice firsthand. "Captain Marcus," the prince said quietly, "will father be angry about the castle burning?" Marcus smiled and ruffled the boy's dark hair. "Your father will be proud that you're safe, Your Highness. Buildings can be rebuilt, but there's only one Prince Louis." In the distance, Marcus could see riders approaching under the royal banner of Valdoria. King Theodore had arrived at last, drawn by the smoke and rumors of battle. Soon, Marcus would have to explain everything: the conspiracy, the arrests, the battle, and the decisions he had made in the king's absence. But for now, in the quiet moment before the next storm of activity, Marcus was content to sit with the boy he had saved and know that sometimes doing what's right matters more than following orders. Prince Louis was safe, the kingdom was free, and honor had been preserved. The cost had been high, but some things were worth any price.